When Tyler Spencer came back from summer spent in South Africa teaching kids about HIV and AIDS, he was absolutely pumped. He spent his school years motivated and excited to get back. But during his senior year of college, a simple Google search alerted him to a scary truth. There is an HIV epidemic right in his own community. Tyler was moved to action, and he founded an organization called the Grassroot Project to educate at-risk youth in D.C.
The Grassroot Project recruits and trains college athletes to be HIV/AIDS educators. We implement 8-week sports-based HIV prevention programs as part of PE classes in DC schools. As student athletes, we felt like we had such potential to have an impact on young people in the city, and particularly on giving young people the information that they needed to protect themselves from HIV. Athletes are very much sort of at this point in their lives that kids aspire to be in. They're independent, they're pursuing higher education, they're competing at the highest level of athletics, and for those reasons, all three of those reasons, young people look up to them.
Thanks so much for being here, Tyler. So I want to know, did it absolutely blow your mind when you first heard that 1 in 20 DC residents are HIV positive or have AIDS?
Absolutely. At the time, I'd spent 3 years traveling all the way to South Africa to thinking that that was where I should be called to fight the epidemic. And as much as that work was impactful, I couldn't believe that here right in my backyard, there was this epidemic that was awful. 1 in 20 is actually 5 times what the World Health Organization would consider to be a severe HIV/AIDS epidemic. And it's something that obviously living right there, I had no idea this was happening, and that was the case with a lot of people in the city. So
it's even significantly more right than some countries in Africa.
Yes,
That's mind-blowing. Like, I didn't realize that. That's absolutely mind-boggling. So you are, obviously, as we mentioned, the founder and CEO of the Grassroot Project, and it's based on a similar program that you were involved with earlier in Africa. How did you know that that approach that worked so well in Africa would work here in the States?
I think it's hard to vocalize. There's so much energy about it. In South Africa, HIV/AIDS was something that no one wanted to talk about, yet it was so tragic and so prevalent in the community. Whereas soccer and sports in general was something that everyone talked about all the time, and it really brought people together. So I think that model is something that, I see you nodding your head, this is something that sort of is universal. It's not just going to happen in a place like South Africa, but the same thing happens in DC. And for me, I knew as a college athlete that college athletes, as accomplished as they are, as hardworking as they are so thirsty to get out and realize who they can be outside of their sports and who they can be outside of their campuses. So I knew that if I could just light a fire in this group of college athletes to get out and address this epidemic, I knew if they heard 1 in 20 people in their hometown was living with HIV/AIDS that they would want to do something about it.
So it's almost just as much for the kids, for educating the kids, than it really is for the athletes themselves. I mean, it really enriches their lives too.
Exactly, yeah. I think a lot of student athletes go through school and never leave their campus. Some of them don't really socialize outside of their teams. It's a very insular environment. And at the same time, kids look up to athletes so much that I knew that they could make a huge difference, athletes, just by showing up in a school and talking to students. But I also knew that as soon as they got off of their campus, as soon as they met some of these kids and learned about what was actually going on in their city, that they would get even more excited about continuing this work.
So, I mean, your program specifically uses Division I NCAA athletes. Was it easy to get a lot of them on board at the beginning?
Surprisingly, it was. And I think that's what got me so excited about seeing this organization really grow. I remember having an athletic director early on. I spent all night writing all these little proposals about what I wanted this organization to be and how we were going to make a difference. And I remember an athletic director saying, this all sounds great, but you're never going to get athletes to give as much time as you're requesting in the community. He said, if you get 10 athletes, then we'll have another conversation. And 2 weeks later, 40 athletes all showed up ready to sacrifice their weekends to become trained to run this program in DC schools. So I think it's true. Athletes are really thirsty to get out and do something outside of their campus, but also I think they're so competitive, and there's some way we can exploit their competitiveness to actually make a really big difference in the community. And when they realize how grand some of these problems are, it's much more difficult than some of the problems they face on the basketball court or on the field, and it just ignites that competitive spirit to get out and say, we have to fix this.
That's brilliant. I mean, you started this in 2009, so it's grown a lot, but you've kept it in DC. Was that by design?
It actually is. For me, I'm equally passionate about making a difference on the HIV epidemic in DC, and really importantly, measuring that difference, as well as keeping the organization kind of true to its culture, and that's one that's driven by NCAA athletes and by young people. So for me, while early on I thought about, well, maybe I should just raise money and then try to hire a more seasoned professional staff to start growing this organization, I realized that doing that may have lost some of the integrity of the organization. So instead of doing that, I spent all of my time really trying to figure out how to grow responsibly while at the same time putting as much as possible of the organization in the hands of 19 to 22-year-olds, 22-year-old college athletes. So that's been a lot of like training them on how to write grants, on how to understand impact evaluation, on how to plan our programs and how to build partnerships and that kind of thing. And it's exciting at this point. I think we're really close to the point where we say, okay, we've got it perfected to some degree in DC, and we're ready to start moving to other cities.
It's a tall order, but it seems like it's really paid off. Tyler, thank you so much for all the amazing work you're doing, and thanks for coming by here to talk to us about it today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. You can find out more information about the Grassroot Project, including how you can show your support at grassrootproject.org. And don't go anywhere. We're answering questions directly from you guys in our segment, Viewers Like You, right after this.